So before we get into today's episode, we have a bit of news for you. The news you have all been waiting for. The Northeast Pipe Band concert is back. Hosted by the Bucksburn and District Pipe Band, we are delighted to confirm that St Lawrence O'Toole Pipe Band will take centre stage at Aberdeen Music Town Hall on the 27th of April 2024. The 9th Pipe Band concert, the last time slot played in Aberdeen, was on the 27th of April 2013. 11 years on, the 27th of April 2024, named Inspired in Aberdeen, Scotland, will mark the second major concert for guest top Grade 1 Pipe Band St Lawrence O'Toole, this time under the leadership of Pipe Major Alan Tuley and lead drummer Stephen Creighton. The 2024 concert will again take place in this spectacular venue renovated and facilities of Aberdeen Music Hall. Bucksburn are excited to have Alan, Stephen and the band in Aberdeen for the 9th concert, a venture that started as a one-off event back in 2010. This indoor pipe band gathering where pipers, drummers, family, friends and supporters gather for the start of a new season where old and new stories are shared, new friendships made and old friendships reignited, along with some exciting special guests. Both bands will play a mix of traditional and contemporary music that I'm sure will keep the audience entertained throughout the night. Bucksburn's 6th place World Championship Novice Juvenile Pipe Band will also be on show for the first time since their 2023 season and look forward to playing alongside Slot for a rendition of Scotland the Brave and Cock of the North. Bucksburn Grade 2 continue to recruit the 2024 season once again. We look forward to an amazing pipe band event in the heart of the city and will continue to keep this venture alive and exciting top Grade 1 bands entertaining the captive audience. For how you can attend this event and how you can get tickets, please go to www.aberdeenperformingarts.com. Episode 110 of the Northeast Corner. I said at the end of the last episode that we'd be getting in the guests now. It's I've just been putting things in place and arranging dates and whatnot. Delighted to be joined today by Moray Liberal Democrat leader, rugby player, mental health advocate, a candidate for Moray in the upcoming election later in the year, video game designer. Any other accolades that I've got to mention in there?
I'm also the sport and culture spokesperson for the Scottish Lib Dems. I should probably track it in.
Man, my research, man. I've not done enough work on it. But
I'm also in the longest constituency name club of Moray West, Nairn and Strathspey as a candidate for that.
I did see that. Like before we get into it, by the way, welcome Neil. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you for having
Neil
me.
Alexander
Absolute
for your full title there. But obviously, like that's going to be I take it Murray's being divided up into 2 constituencies now. Like, what is the reason behind that, and when was that kind of decided? Because obviously, it's always been contested as just the entirety of Moray, right?
So these things are always kind of reviewed, and it's really important probably to say that this is done in a non-partisan way. There's the commissions that go and do these things, and they do it every single election. I believe the next Scottish Parliament election is going to have another boundary review, and then the local elections after that will then also have a boundary review. So Moray, unfortunately, is no longer Moray. It is now Moray West, Nairn and Strathspey, or if you are of a Buckie persuasion, you're going to be in Moray East. What that means is we are literally going as far as Ardersier and then as south as Aviemore and Kennussie. It creates a whole lot of problems for any political activist, never mind for voters to understand who they are voting for. The parts that are coming into Moray used to be Lib Dem held actually up until 2015, and only the SNP won those, has won that since. So it's a really interesting time to be campaigning in this area, but yeah, it creates a lot of logistical challenges, shall we say.
Were you in the area at the time of the 2017 election?
No, I wasn't. No.
I was just because I always like bring up to people, I was very surprised that this area went Conservative. I know that they'd been trying for a few elections and they'd been getting closer and closer and closer, but I think it was like one of those kind of well, for me as someone that is not a Conservative voter and most likely will never be a Conservative voter, if it was like quite a shock. It was like someone I guess I took for granted. I just always thought the Conservative Party will never be in power in this area. And now I think it's 2 elections running, so 2017, and then the 2019 one was like super close. I remember being at a friend's wedding, so I had to vote by proxy that day because it was like such a big election with obviously it was well, they did the TV series on it recently, didn't they? With the John. It was to kind of cover not just that, but then obviously what happened with COVID in the year to come. But I remember like it was Boris and the Digger breaking through like those blocks, get Brexit done. There was like this whole kind of fatigue of the stalemate that I guess had been created since the referendum had happened. But I just remember waking up and seeing like a massive Tory majority and that Douglas Ross had reclaimed a seat, and I was like, wow, this is like a Christmas nightmare.
Yeah, well, I can imagine. And to be fair, well, it's hard to be fair in these sort of things in a non-biased way. In a lot of elections, and you kind of touched upon it with that, with the kind of get Brexit done ideology, and it's been the same in Scotland for so many elections, that polarising nature of dividing voters between a single issue often, and it's creeping back into things with the Rwanda scheme and a lot of kind of, rhetoric that's coming from the Scottish government. I mean, they looked at the stuff that's came out of that over the weekend about making Scotland Tory free and very much creating that us and them culture. And unfortunately, when you can rally around specific issues, when an election becomes a single issue, it makes it a lot more challenging. And there was some surprise results, I think, across the country. But I remember waking up on 2019. Actually, I stay up most of the time, ironically, for election results. I love watching them during the night. This time, unfortunately, I won't be able to do it this time.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll be on the news, hopefully for the right reasons. But I just remember feeling just this sense of massive disappointment, similar to what happened with the Brexit referendum, and when Trump got elected a few years prior to that. So hopefully a wee bit more positive this time.
Yeah, it's crazy to think that's like 8 years ago now, because 2016 seemed like such a kind of defining year just for how everything's played out since, right? Like obviously you were mentioning that's when obviously Trump won the election, the Brexit referendum, it all kind of felt like it was going in this like right-wing direction, and then it felt like at least in America in 2020 it came back. God knows what's going to happen this year. We will get on to that later down the line. But I suppose like my first question is, why politics?
This is probably the hardest question in the world. I think everybody asks me the same thing. And I mean, I look at the current way society is, and we've talked about it already, how people are polarising, dividing people. But I call it cheesy, call it cliche, but I just have an inherent a desire to want to help people. That's just the way I was brought up. I was brought up in a community which was faced absolute tragedy. So I was pretty much seen community coming together and community
projects. Am I right in
projects.
thinking it's Dunblane you're originally from? So obviously you're referencing the school shooting, for lack of a better term. Obviously, Were you actually attendant of that school when that happened, or?
I was I was still before school in age. My sister was at the school. My brother, I believe, was at high school at that point. He was a bit older, but I've seen some of the footage back from that. It's still something that's hard to talk about, but I'm happy to. And I seen some clips of my mum or other people in that situation, and seeing that look of fear is something I'd never want to see on anyone ever again. And as much as there's such a horrible, devastating thing that hit the community there, I was brought up in that community coming together, and people who have always been full of praise of local politicians of all political colours and what they did for that community, and people like priests, local teachers and things like that coming together. I mean, the Snowdrop campaign is something I always like to reflect upon, because it's probably one of the biggest single community pieces of activism, and they changed gun control laws in this country forever because of that tragedy. And then things like the Dunblane Community Centre, which if anybody's ever in the area, please do go and check out, they used some of the funds that was raised from donations because of the tragedy to build this brilliant sports and leisure facility that's in Dunblane, because there wasn't ever really anything like that before, and I seen that getting built. So as much as there's real tragedy there, I was kind of born into that community activism sort of thing. And I seen it really, really early on. It's always something that stuck by with me.
There's a saying out there of, if you don't get involved in politics, politics will get involved with you. Do you think that's a true statement, or maybe
Absolutely.
not to the extent of like becoming like active in like a political party, but obviously it affects everyone's life in different ways, of course.
Of course, yeah, and it's absolutely crucial. I mean, like, I'm really, really passionate about a lot of different things, sport, mental health, and I just seen it. I seen what's been going on in our society, and to be fair, full disclosure, just coming out of the pandemic, I was not that keen to want to be at the forefront of it. I wanted to help because I seen, some things that I really, really agreed with, but I didn't really see myself as a candidate. I really didn't. And I just thought to myself, well, if not me, then who? And to be honest, if anybody is considering trying to get involved in politics and doesn't know if they should, try it. That's honestly what they should do. But no matter what political persuasion they are, I'd say that honestly, because we need desperately more ideas in this country and to bring people together. And that's what I really try to do. I really just want to develop what I can and help my community in any way possible.
And I suppose, like, especially the last couple of years, and I think this is probably as a result of the emergence of social media and stuff like that, there is like a lot of kind of apathy or an apathetic attitude towards politics, right? Like, you hear a lot of the stuff, all politicians are the same, so on and so forth, like that. And I suppose I can understand that frustration in a way when you look at it from like a face value point of view, and you see the House of Commons and you see the I don't want to say the top echelon, but the Prime Minister, the leader of the opposition, and the way that people feel like, because it's always seemed like a two-party system over here, whether it's Conservative or Labour, they've always felt like nothing has drastically changed, right? It always feels like kind of nuanced differences. But at the same time, like I'm speaking to you just now, right? And you're looking to become an MP, but you don't come across to me as like what someone would say as a career politician. You come across as like a really like regular, genuine guy. Do you know what I mean? Like, we're just having this conversation of where...
Do you know what? If I was wanting to be a career politician, I'm really unfortunately in the wrong political party to do that. We care a lot about our communities. There's no doubt about that. But it's definitely not the easiest career in the best of times. And I think any politician, to be fair, would say that. But you look at social media, for example, it is horrible. You get some absolute nastiness in there, and that goes right across that political spectrum. I mean, it's really like I've friends and family, partners, when I've been getting involved, have seen some of the nasty things that have been said, even to myself. And it really, you'd think people kind of forget there's a human behind that. And I think that's really, really challenging. And I think because a lot of what has happened within British society, the politics and how the systems like Westminster, and I'm sure we could talk about like electoral reform, that's probably an entire separate podcast. But I think a lot of the systems that exist need fundamental change, because that is what is also helping to feed polarising forces like the rise of reform and the far right within the Conservative Party. And I think there just needs to be a lot more understanding. There's people here, and that goes right across the board.
Can you understand how people that maybe are not as involved in politics kind of come to that conclusion, or that wrong conclusion in my view, of every politician's the same, and like that kind of they're distancing themselves from politics when, and I suppose it's kind of fed into when you see different characters, I'll say, for a kind of lenient kind of term for it, getting in and stuff like that. You know, the obvious example in America is Trump, right? Back in the day where he was going for 2016, CNN would, and the news outlets in America would always be like, anyone that like votes for him is part of that fanatical cult, which I understand that exists, right? But like just seeing recently like stuff that he attends in America and seeing like there is like genuine like amount of support for him, and they can't all be lumped into the same kind of fanatical, cult figures, right? Some of them are just like Republican voters, right? But like it's the whole kind of jumping to the opposite side of the road because they want something different, and then going down like an extreme path, right?
Well, I think it's really, really challenging because not all you get a group of rugby players again, every single one of them is different. And all politicians, or every politician I've ever met, is very, very different, and some really, really interesting characters right across the board there. But I think when you look at people like Trump and even in the Johnson eras, these sort of figures, a lot of them benefit from people not getting involved.
Yeah.
Like there was a big documentary I remember not long before the second election where Trump lost, and it really analysed that they were engaging in dissuading people from turning out for Hillary Clinton. Now, I think Hillary Clinton, there was issues on that campaign clearly, and it dissuaded a lot of people. But by not participating in the system, by not getting more people involved, that creates a bigger problem, and it creates vacuums for people to take advantage of. So, like, and that's why I go back to it. Like, if you want to get involved in politics, again, with any political persuasion, go and do it, because we need these kind of new ideas, and we need passionate people who want to serve their community. Otherwise, it creates a bigger problem.
Yeah, I think the biggest one I remember of at least like a known figure encouraging people to not go and vote was I think it was 2015, Russell Brand saying, if there's going to be a revolution, let's not vote. And then the party that everyone was complaining about at the time stayed in power. It benefited them, right? And obviously Russell Brand's went and grifted to whatever he is now, and obviously he's got a bunch of legal trouble, which we'll just
legal disputes that we do not want to comment on.
Story for another day. But how did the joining the Liberal Democrats come about? Like, what age did you get involved in politics, and did you know straight away what party you were going to align with, or how did that kind of decision come together?
So I was always brought up to treat others as you'd expect to be treated yourself, treat everyone fairly, equally. It was something that established my growing up, and again, what I was seeing in my community. I spent quite a bit of time delving into and learning, and I'm very analytical. I mean, I used to do football data analysis, and I started to look at party manifestos, what they fundamentally believed. And when I seen that Liberal Democrats put their community first, they believe power should be as local as possible, where possible, and they believe in liberty, freedom, fairness. Like, it made complete sense for me to join them. And I was really, really fortunate to have an incredible modern studies teacher at my high school in St. Mons, Mr. Quigley, who I will happily give a shout out, and I have before, and I'll make sure to send him a copy of the podcast out. But he was a brilliant debater in our modern studies classes, but he also encouraged it in a lot of ways. And yeah, he was happy to give some people stick as well for some viewpoints, but he was also happy to take it, and he also had a pet rock, which was really bizarre. But so I spent time looking at these things, and I learned, and it found me. And it's probably important to remember that I have not always agreed with everything that Liberal Democrats have ever done. I mean, it's very well known that I wasn't a big fan of certain coalition decisions. And I kind of fell out of love with politics for a while. And the pandemic, kind of seeing what had happened, seeing how our communities been decimated, but also come together on specific things, it brought me back into the kind of political thinking and wanting to make a difference again, especially living up in Moray. I don't know if you want me to delve into the story, but I will. We were basically outside enjoying a fire, having a bit of barbecue, and we heard from one of the people that was staying on our street, somebody we knew, that somebody that was in care, it's the place they work, the elderly resident had broken their hip. And so when they phoned A&E, they basically were getting referred from Elgin to go to Wick. I mean, we know it's bad going to Raigmore, but for an elderly person to be told to go and drive themselves,
a 4-hour journey, right?
Exactly, to go and receive treatment. It was almost like with my rugby, the red mist descended, and that really motivated me to do more. And that was probably the real turning point for me in a lot of ways. Because until that point, I was happy helping, I was happy trying to make a difference internally, but never really seen myself as a candidate until that point.
I remember that podcast that I listened to you on, I was just mentioning to you before we came on today. I know you mentioned, which is obviously a massive topic for this area, was the, I guess, the Keep Mum. Trying trying to think of the word.
The Keep Mum campaign, yeah, they are brilliant people in that campaign.
And obviously it's something that, I don't know when they even, was it maybe 2017 that the maternity service left? And obviously like there's apparently a deal in place to get something back. But, you know, we spoke to Richard Lockhead last year, that was February 23, and he said there was progress being made. Haven't really heard anything on it since then. And like, you know, Lee was almost like, you know, experienced this. He had a son in 2019 that was nearly born in a lay-by because he was rushing his partner through to, I think it was Aberdeen, you know. And obviously like it's all, you know, sometimes Moray can be seen as a bit of a highway between Aberdeen and Inverness, right, of the catchment areas for many different things. But it's obviously, if you're in Elgin, which I guess is probably in the middle of the two bigger cities, it's, you know, it's a catch-22, right? You're going to be making at least an hour journey either way to. And then
if you have healthcare considerations and you're, you know, in vulnerable groups, what about that? We actually know somebody who recently did have to go and go give birth at Raigmore, even though they were promised to be born at Dr. Gray's. Now, I believe the maternity situation is there's a recruitment campaign going on, but we still do not have that final time frame, and it's something we need to keep the pressure on with. The Keep Mum group are an incredible campaign. I've met with them a couple of times, and the work they do is really, really important, and across the political divide, it's hard not to be able to support that. I just think with the maternity situation, we really need to be getting these final dates, and we really need to know when this is going to come about, because people, I mean, it was reported by, I believe, the P&J that there's mothers in the RAF when they've been based up here who are considering not giving birth and not having a family because of the situation. And I tell one of the stories when the first time I went out door knocking in Moray, and Moray, as much as I know you said the kind of bypass into Aberdeen and Inverness, Moray has a massive whiskey distillery industry. It has so much going for it in like digital economy, like look at my company, Hunted Cow Game Studios. But also when you see people possibly putting off having a family, it just breaks your heart. Like, that was a really hard article to read. And one of the first times I went out door knocking, sorry, I'm going back to my point here, I'm getting too worked up about the issues here. And you hear the stories about people giving birth in these lay-bys, like you say. It was, I think, the second or third door up in Elgin that I was knocking, and I was talking about the issue, saying I'm really passionate about bringing back maternity services. And they were like, yeah, that happened to me. I was literally in an ambulance and I was like, I was stunned. And they even asked me, you know, for a political type, you don't speak much. And I was like, I'm really sorry.
Yeah.
I'm speechless. The situation you had, it should not be happening to anybody in 2024.
It's almost like some people have accepted that it's the norm, which is obviously shouldn't be the case in any area, you know.
Exactly.
So what was like the first ever issue that you got involved in politics? I have here the Iraq War, because I know you mentioned that on that podcast. Was that the first kind of thing that ever came across that made you take a stance on something, I guess?
I would say it was my first political experience. It was the first real political thing from my childhood that I can remember. The first thing I probably hard campaigned on was probably during, I think it was the 2011 Scottish election. I was campaigning in Clackmannanshire. We had the regional list candidate of Willie Rennie, who wasn't the Scottish Lib Dem leader at that point. Met him, we talked a lot about politics. He helped me learn a lot of the ropes, really, actually. So I probably should give him a shout out in that way. I'm sure he'll be pleased. But oh my goodness, Willie Rennie is a different beast on campaigning. Like, he is absolutely incredible. I've never seen somebody with such stamina. I mean, all that hill running really definitely helps him out a lot.
Endurance, man.
But that was probably my first campaigning experience. See, I've because I've my university at Glasgow in Glasgow Caledonian, and then also I lived down south. I've kind of been through different campaigning areas, and then coming back during post-pandemic in that 2019 Scottish election, I was campaigning in the Central Belt with people like the amazing Paul McGarry, who's our housing spokesperson. Really interesting story. Housing spokesperson who used to be homeless.
Oh, wow.
Very, very interesting character. Definitely should interview him.
Yeah,
Definitely
no,
should.
100%. And like, I suppose a lot of the time people feel that they don't get that kind of being able to be related to, right, through these topics when they talk to someone that represents them or someone that's dealing with the issue. So I'd imagine that's like really refreshing for people that you know, that then go through like challenges like this. You know,
Yeah.
The Iraq War thing was that was like the first thing I remember, because I must have been about 7, 8 years old around the time. But I remember every day the news being on when I was getting ready for school, and I remember seeing the marches of like the million people going through London, and obviously I've watched a lot of like history on it through the Associated Press and that, and I know the leader at the time, I believe, the Liberal Democrats, Charles Kennedy, was was one of the main voices against, as well as the party, obviously. But I mean, the one kind of picture I have of what I remember of that was when the actual invasion happened, and waking up to, I guess, the Baghdad bombings, or what is now known as shock and awe, was the operation, I guess it was called, and just being almost petrified of what was going on, because that was a military exchange that I'd never seen before in my life. Like, it was brutal, you know, even like to be shown on, I think it was BBC News at like 8 a.m. was like, you know, it was crazy. And then obviously, like, as that played out.
Yeah, well, I you know, we talk about that first political memory, Charles Kennedy. I remember his Stop the War rally and the speech before that began. And I remember very vividly, it's probably a really important lesson. Charles Kennedy, when that happened, was really vilified by people across the political establishment. He was called a traitor, he was called this, he was called that and the other thing, but he still stood up for his beliefs, he stood up for what he believed in the face of some really horrible hatred. I mean, thank goodness there wasn't social media back then, because I think it would have even just been tenfold. But I mean, I think history's kind of proved he was right to do so. He was right to question these things.
Yeah, well, I even remember, I think it was Gordon Brown a few years ago. Obviously, he was the Chancellor at the time. I think it was, I can't remember, it was Good Morning Britain with Piers Morgan, who I'm not exactly a fan of, but like he was asking him like about his time in politics, and I think it's all well and good for him to come out and say this now, but he was saying that at the time he wasn't convinced, and that the Americans were going to look to take Saddam out anyway, which, if you look into a bunch of other different stuff of how, stuff post 9/11 and how NATO intervention in the Middle East has went, it's kind of always followed a bit of a theme. And I think George W. Bush, I think it was his dad that was the president when the first kind of Gulf War had happened. And I think because usually when America is in a conflict with someone and the regime changes, right? And he was the outlier in that, I suppose, as well as Castro. I mean, they tried many times to overthrow him in Cuba and whatnot. Yeah. Not saying these were good leaders in any way, shape or form. There's no doubt that they were monsters, obviously, but like them kind of still having that objective in mind, like they didn't like the fact that he had stayed in power, and it was that whole kind of son was going to be like, I'm going to be the guy to do this, I think, because they, there was many different reasons they gave, but the main one that was propagated out in the press, and that was WMD. I always remember it was Colin Powell, I think it was anthrax or something he had at the UN, and he was like, we know where these labs are, and he had all these vials and that, and then 3 weeks in, it was like, where's the evidence? And it was like, it's coming.
Well, if there was ever an advert for power should never be unchecked, unscrutinised. I mean, I have a lot of issues with the Westminster system, and I'm sure we'll go on to that, but Labour had a massive majority back then, and there was clearly issues, and I'm sure there was a lot of learning curves, and what I do think probably some of these people do question the decisions they made. If there ever was a real advert for wanting to change systems fundamentally from the top down, like probably the Iraq War would be a big one.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that have went on in my lifetime, but I think it's
where do we begin?
For me, it's the obvious biggest mistake politically that I can think off the top of my head, just at the cost of life, and what it's then led to in terms of how the Middle East has kind of went since then, and then I think kind of overthrowing governments has led to certain kind of extremist groups getting in, and then that's kind of came back to then become another problem, but. kind of moving on from that, like the coalition you mentioned, obviously you left the party for a bit. I take it you just weren't a fan of, like, obviously what happened. Where to give a bit of context to people that maybe aren't familiar with it, in the 2010 election, it was a hung parliament, and the Conservative Party and the Liberal Democrats came to a deal of where they would combine the seats to then form a coalition government where David Cameron would be the Prime Minister, Nick Clegg would be the Deputy, and form the...
I respect a lot of things that got done. I mean, equal marriage. I mean, the Conservatives can try and pretend to take credit for that, but without Liberal Democrats in government, that wouldn't have happened. And there were some really good policies in there, but I think, unfortunately, the coalition is really where I lost quite a lot of political interest at points. I found it challenging. I think everybody did, really. I totally understand some of the thinking, their A to B, if you will, of where they got to with that. Would I have made the same decision? Really hard to say. I mean, Liberal Democrats are very much under new management now. I mean, you can criticise any leader historically for any party. I mean, it wasn't that long ago Jeremy Corbyn was leading the Labour Party, or Boris Johnson was in, or even Liz Truss is maybe a more extreme example, was in charge of the Conservatives.
An internship, really, wasn't it?
Well, I think some interns get longer than that. But it was a challenge, and I think I needed to be fair, I also did some study abroad, which was a brilliant opportunity, and so I had time away from Scotland. So I think I needed to find myself a wee bit. That sounds so cliche, but yeah. But I came back to the party because whilst I may have fallen out of love, it was what my roots were. We go back to that again. Community coming first, fairness, equality, these values which are, written in our constitution. It's literally the first line on any membership card that gets handed out. Do you know? It's what I believe in, and I realised that I was a young man as well, that it is okay to disagree. You need to do it in a kind of respectable way. I think a lot of people forget that down the years. But would the same decision be made these days? Definitely not. I don't think Ed Davey's going to be making any pacts with anyone anytime soon. Yeah,
it is crazy. The cycle changes almost every 10 years, right? Like the people that, I mean, funnily enough, David Cameron is a part of the, well, I don't know, he is a part of the government, but he's not an MP, he's a lord. And there's he can't be contested on anything because of that.
He was literally given a lordship so that he could serve as a foreign secretary, and he's not accountable to the House of Commons.
Yeah, he doesn't get questioned by MPs,
Again, if there was ever an advert for House of Lords reform, that has got to be it. Well, that Michelle Mone probably doesn't help either in that situation.
So when did you become leader of the Lib Dems for this area, and what was that like? Because I would imagine that was like a massive honour for you to be given that role.
So it was pretty much put to a vote of local party members. We had an elder statesman chair previously. And then our AGM, as you do, you get asked, people put themselves forward, and somebody's recommended that I should do it. And I kind of jumped into it, both feet off the ground. And it was a big honour. It was also very daunting.
Yeah.
I was still learning very much about being a local champion in my area, and I learned a lot. I've made, I'm not going to pretend that I'm perfect. I probably haven't done everything the best way possible. I try my best, and we've had some really awesome wins, which I'm really, really proud of. It was probably not long after the local council elections. I believe it was around October 2022. I'm trying to remember now. Goodness, so the local council elections would have been, Scottish Parliament would have been 2021.
Yeah,
and local council 2022. So yeah, it would have been around October or so. Because we really decided to try and do things a little bit differently, and I kind of embraced that.
Yeah, because I think, was there not a mention as well that after that was under, because this was around the time that Liz Truss's
internship.
And then there was the whole kind of, I know Ed Davey was one that championed because the country wanted an election at that point, because they were like, look, you've had your replacement for the guy that has, been found to be lying and doing things unlawfully, and whatever he got turfed out for. And then he tried to get back in and was nearly very successful in doing so 6 weeks after being removed. And then obviously Sunak came into power, and then they had a second one in a row that hadn't been voted for.
They have had an unelected mandate for so long.
Yeah.
Like, nobody mentioned things like the Rwanda policy on any manifesto. So the things that they are doing have no mandate. They should have called an election a long, long time ago. And I've always said that as well. We're ready for the general election whenever Rishi wants to go to the palace.
Yeah, well, he said autumn, didn't he? But whether he sticks to it, I think the latest.
Good question.
Because we did mention this on our correspondent via direct message. I think the latest that can happen is probably January 25.
I think that's right.
Push, yeah.
That's right.
But it's very interesting because I think I can't remember a year where our election and the American election have happened in close proximity.
Yeah.
And it could literally be weeks apart if it does come in.
It could be the same day.
Right, yeah, exactly.
You could literally have polls close on a Thursday and then the American election polls open.
Yeah.
Literally straight after it. It would have a lot of coverage challenges, I'm sure, in media, etc.
100%, yeah. Especially
I can sense the dread almost in trying to cover both.
But it is almost like, it's a bad analogy, but I was saying to Lee, like, I do find like the election night results quite exciting. Like, it's almost like, when a football transfer deadline day comes about at Sky Sports, like, it is very much like that, but it's people getting like excited about like Labour have won like Sunderland East or something like that. Do you know what I mean? Instead of like Manchester City have signed someone for 60 million.
Who's Murray West and Aaron Strathspey going to sign on deadline day at a minute to midnight?
But it's like, I suppose, I don't know if it's just because it's always the way it's been or it's done on purpose, but it does add like that kind of excitement, the fact that it goes into the early hours and we still have like the whole, it could go either way,
Call me a political nerd. I used to. I should stay up for all the election. I stay up for all the election. And this, ironically, is probably going to be the first election because I'm a candidate that I'm not going to be able to do that. So I don't know what I'm going to have to do. I'm going to have like a tablet or something and go around and ask them in the blazer and shirt. It's going to be a really interesting dynamic, that not just curled up on the sofa watching it with a bag of nachos or something.
Yeah, I know. It almost feels like, because you obviously get, is it like exit polls and stuff, obviously where there's a prediction of some sort, which most of the time tend to be as accurate, somewhat accurate, but sometimes they can go the opposite way in rare cases. It almost feels like watching it overnight and not knowing the result. There's almost like a safety in that. And then you're either going to be, in 2019 when I woke up and Boris had got the majority, I'd kind of thought I'd woken up in like a Tim Burton nightmare or something like that, But as you mentioned there, you are a candidate for when this election does come about. Are you already in the kind of campaign staging, or are you kind of waiting for the starting pistol of the electoral campaign to come round? Or
what a lot of people will realise, and I hope more so, is the work of an activist, especially a Liberal Democrat activist. It never really stops. So I've already been out campaigning in different areas. I've been speaking along Ardussie or Elgin, Lossiemouth. I've been speaking to a lot of local people because I am just so ready for this general election to be called. I want it to be called because not only do I just love the democratic process, but it is time for change.
Yeah.
And, quote that Bob Dylan song, "The times they are a-changing." And some people may not like that, but I have caught this sense that people on the doorstep are really just ready for a change.
Yeah.
They are so fed up of being taken for granted. It doesn't matter what their local issues. I always tend to go and ask them, right, what is the top thing that is on your mind? And you might see it, I don't want to speak over people. I don't want to tell them as it is. I want to listen to them. I do a lot of listening on the doorsteps and ask them. And a lot of people are really just fed up with the Conservatives and the SNP. They really want a strong alternative, to somebody who put local priorities first. Things like the maternity service we were talking about, like the safety of the A96, the dualling project. People have different opinions on that, but a lot of people agree that we need to improve the safety of that road because the amount of deaths happening is tragic and it's unacceptable in 2024 Scotland. And they are really just fed up of listening to the same divisive rhetoric, that polarising argument of whether you are vote for us because we want Scottish independence and that's the only way forward, or you're in that hard unionist, you need to vote for us to keep the SNP out. That's just dividing people on the same issue. Why are you not focusing on that local priorities? That's my mantra. And to be honest, like, live by the sword, die by the sword. I want to put local priorities first in our area.
And even, I would say there's even national things that obviously get overlooked for this kind of mudslinging match that has been going on for so long now, right? I mean, Moray is, I wouldn't say the epicenter of it, but it is an area because it's it was an SNP area in terms of the MP, and now it's a Conservative area for the time being. Those two sides have conflicted over many an issue, and it does like blow my mind a lot of the time. And obviously social media does exacerbate it. Like, I find it very interesting that the way that people treat each other on social media, I'm convinced most of the time they would not like engage like that in real life. Like, I mean, obviously there is rare occurrences where people, you know, do have those kind of screaming matches and whatever, but I think the majority of people, it's just the whole kind of social media injection of like dopamine, I guess, you know.
What I think a lot of people are realising is a lot of the catches with these two parties comes with voting for them for whatever polarising reason. They are literally two sides of the same coin. Fundamentally, there is not a lot of difference between them because they are just trying to divide people to further their own argument forward. And to be honest, I just want to see local priorities coming first. Like, that's my kind of mantra. And you're absolutely right. People wouldn't talk to people like that the way they do on Twitter, or X, I should say now, before I get banned.
That is an absolute bin fire of a site now. I hear, like, as soon as that dude took it over, I just was like, I'm not bothering with this. And
it's hard. It's difficult because without these social media platforms, local politics, it becomes lost, and we need to have that in that day and age.
100%. I guess, I mean, I'm obviously not on it anymore, but from what I hear, the things that it shows people are not very nice. Do you know what I mean? In the kind of For You section and stuff like that. And but yeah,
I've spoken, like, honestly, see some of the trolls that you do see. I've spoken to people on doors that are from both sides and voted Conservative and voted SNP before, and they've seen the rhetoric that's been rising even amongst their own leadership, and they are just so ready for something different. I may not agree with them on everything. Like, nobody agrees with everybody on everything 100% of the time. Yeah. But that need for reform and that need for giving us really crucial local services improvements, those things they do agree with. And that's where the common ground is. We really need to bring people together. That's really what I've always tried to do. So yeah, I think we really need to take a step back. And it comes back to that earlier point. People are human beings. Like, we could really do with detoxifying politics on the social media.
Yeah, I think one thing that instantly comes to me over it is, like, I believe social media has made people way more comfortable with being in echo chambers, of where they're only listening to what, you know, their kind of first thought is a lot of the time, right? Like, I seen a comment on a certain figure's court case. I won't mention who it was, but they were talking about how it was like a load of media-driven stuff, that the kind of conspiracy stuff that are out to get him and that. And some guy put in the response, just like level-headed, was like, the only reason you were saying that is because he tells you like what you think. So you're always going to defend him. There is nothing that could be shown to you that could like then, you know, be giving you the facts and getting like actually shown what is going on, rather than, because that's the whole thing, isn't it? And it's also tribal, like we were just mentioning. It's like everyone splits left, everyone splits right on an issue, or wherever their party or whatever party they identify with sits on, right? And I think it has people are more uncomfortable than ever than disagreeing with someone, because they see it almost as like a challenge to their view of the world, and then that's what starts the whole kind of back and forth, and
people see those echo chambers and they see what happens online and all this nastiness, and they think that's how it transcends to real life. It's not. It's really not. Like, some of the people I've spoken to, I've spoken to some local councillors and local candidates and things, and they're just good human beings who want to serve the community. I may not agree with them on everything, and that's fair. That's par for the course. And I'm sure they'll happily tell me to my face about things they disagree with. But it's difficult because that echo chamber exists because people follow the accounts and follow the people that they agree with. And whilst there are people who come onto these sites for information, articles, whatever it may be, the ones that get shared by friends, etc., they'll see that So it does create that bit of tribal instinct.
Well as like the algorithms as well, where they're putting things in front of people's faces of what they've already watched. So it's just reinforcing everything, you know.
Exactly. Well, I can tell you for a fact I've never watched GB News in my life, but it's the amount of articles or video clips that keep seeming to come into my feed. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost like, I wouldn't say that it's Britain's version of Fox News. I've not really watched it, but I remember Lee was telling me it was when the Gary Lineker kind of controversy was going on at the BBC, and they had decided to do their version of Match of the Day.
I remember
like
that.
One of the most ridiculous things. I watched like 10 seconds of it, and you could just see where it was going, and it's like, it begs belief, to be honest, because I've always kind of seen the news channels over here as I can see some of them having a bias, but I don't think it's as apparent as if you've seen it in America, right, where there's obviously a very CNN, Democrat, Fox News, very hard conservative leaning, right? Whereas this is like the first time, and I suppose like media, a lot of like British media is owned by a small selection of people that do, you know, probably.
That's why we need more local podcasts.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But what do you make of politics in its current state going into this election? Because my kind of first thought, and I think there's going to be a great chance for outside of the two main parties to make a lot of gains, mainly because the main, we're taking Scotland into it, the main three, but in the UK and, you know, England, Wales and that, it would be the Conservatives and Labour Party, and then you would add the SNP, obviously, or just the SNP and Conservative Party in Scotland, because, you know, the Labour existence had kind of been not as much as it once was, but like my kind of first thought would be that Labour are probably going to win the general election in terms of like a whole. Admittedly, Keir Starmer seems to be doing everything that he can to lose it. But I like what I said to Lee at the time was I don't think the Labour Party have done anything to get into government. It's more how bad the Conservatives have.
It's absolutely that. And when you speak to folk on the doors or even see, you know, go to community groups or whatever it is you do, people are angry at what happened. Particularly, you look at that point of Partygate onwards.
Yeah.
Like the absolute. What they were doing was so wrong. To have it also crossed those lines of, you know, elitist behaviour. One rule for them, one rule for us. It really did shake, I think, this country to its core, and that goes from, you know, from Plymouth or from Devon right all the way up to Shetland, Orkney. Like, I think a lot of people were angry at what happened, and that's no different here. Looking at it from a national perspective, I think people are just ready for change. Like, this government's been dying on its heels for a long, long time. I mean, I think they're now on to 2 or 3 different possible leadership candidates coming in this week who may usurp Rishi.
There's almost like a civil war going on in the Conservative Party at the moment, right?
Yeah, and I think it has shook a lot of people to its core and seen just how bad the systems need change. And I think you're right to an extent. It's maybe not so much Labour doing particularly strongly, but how badly the Conservatives are doing. And that opens up a lot of opportunities. I mean, I've talked about it already. Becoming Moray West near Strathspey opens a lot of opportunity there because it's a completely new area. Nobody has, you know, bragging rights to say that they've won this seat before, but I do also think,
and there's always been a Liberal Democrat presence in the Highlands anyway. Obviously Charles Kennedy, he was MP for, I think, was it the Highlands and Islands or
Rossguy and Lochaber, so not too far away. So, and then we had our MP up till 2015 and Danny Alexander, and then we had, you know, Shetland and Orkney has an incredible MP in Alistair Carmichael, who's a fantastic champion for our whisky industry and really has fought a lot of these really harsh changes to the alcohol duty that they've been wanting to put through, which really would have harmed specifically the whisky industry, but not the rest of alcohol industries. So I do think there is a big opportunity for change there. I think as a Liberal Democrat in the local area, I think of a kind of analogy of you build a house. Yeah. Like, you don't have your house built right on the final day. You have to get yourself a strong foundation of strong local campaigns about what matters to the people in your area, and then you build it from there. And that's what we've been doing, and we've had, like I was saying earlier, we've had some really good successes already. I mean, we don't have a Moray councillor, but we have already managed to get 3 big wins with Moray Council, with things like getting inspections on every single council home in the area on dangerous concrete for RAAC. After we asked if they were going to do that, we then also called for a ban to legal pavement parking, which has been a massive issue in Elgin Town Centre. It's only a matter of time before somebody gets hurt. And then the council announced that they were going to bring in funding, a short-term funding plan to pay the police basically to regulate it. I have reservations about a short-term plan, and it needs a long-term solution, but it's a step in the right direction. And then the one I'm probably most proud of is bringing in legislation for domestic abuse survivors to get support for the housing waiting list for council homes. That was something that didn't exist in Moray. And we brought that up first last year, and now it's been put into the new housing regulations that are being brought in by people like Councillor Dunbar and the housing officers. So we have really been focused on those kind of local issues, and to a lot of success, and we're making a difference at that point. So that's what we're doing without a councillor. So we're really just trying to build our foundation blocks from there.
Awesome. Can I ask you about the 2 leaders of the Liberal Democrats, obviously one in Scotland and one for the UK. Yeah. So you mentioned Davy a little bit. What do you make of his reign so far and going into this election?
I mean, you look at the by-elections down south in Cheshire and Amersham and further afield, it's hard to say that it's not been successful. I mean, he's not had that first big test yet of a general election, but I think he's doing all the right things. He spoke a lot about things like bringing in more GPs, really giving the care sector a lot of time and investment that he needs. So I think he spoke a lot of sense. So I think he's doing a fantastic job. So we'll see what happens with the general election. I think a lot of people are responding to his kind of positivity. I'm guessing with the Scottish
Alex Cole-Hamilton, yeah.
Yeah, I think, again, we had, to be fair to Alex, he's done a brilliant job. He had the first big test of the Scottish local elections where we were the only opposition party that made substantial gains. I think, he's done a fantastic job. He's brought like this new energy to it, like real, like, see, I can be hyperactive at the best of times. You probably tell that just from the way I've been speaking here. And again, apologies if I speak too fast at times. But Alex is similar in that sense that he has brought this really new hope, new energy message back to the Scottish Lib Dems as well. And I think building on the strong foundation that Willie gave us previously to that, he's doing a good job.
And am I right in thinking he actually visited you? Actually got, well, not just you, I'm sure, but you came up and you went round the doors with him?
Yeah, he came around and he knocked some doors with us up in Elgin, and people were really responding to him, like really positively. A lot of people were saying how he's speaking so much sense on things like mental health, on sewage. So he has, he's already resonating really, really well locally, and he's not had his first big Scottish Parliament elections, which will
when I first became aware of him, because obviously Willie Rennie was the leader for a long time, and I know he had a lot to do with like mental health championing and stuff like that. But one thing that I really did respect, I won't mention specifically what I'm meaning here, but there was during the pandemic, obviously it was a very serious situation.
Yeah.
And a lot of things that were in place were unprecedented, right, for the emergency.
Yeah.
But there was some things in late 2021 from where it was transitioning from a pandemic to an endemic thing. Yeah. Where for me, and I'm sure for a lot of the general public, were a bit of an overreach. And he was literally the only one that I've seen kind of talking about it in like not in like a tinfoil hat way, basically, right? But being realistic and respectful and calling this kind of stuff out, but also realising the seriousness of the situation as well, which was something that really impressed me off the bat. But I will leave it at that because I try to be like unbiased.
He is a brilliant campaigner on the doorsteps and also on big issues. And it's very much the Lib Dem mantra. It always has been to focus on things that some people don't. And that comes back to our community politics. I mean, we're the only ones that talk about trying to bring in a strategy for long COVID sufferers. I mean, long COVID was something that was discussed a lot during the pandemic, but who else has been discussing it right now?
Yeah, it was kind of, yeah. And there was one thing that, especially during the pandemic, that was proper crazy to me, and it was an issue that's obviously affected the UK for a while, but the issue of like homelessness.
Yeah.
And at the start of the pandemic, it was such an urgent priority to get everyone that was homeless into hotels and housing and stuff like that, so the disease didn't spread. And then when that was over, it was just everyone, you know what I mean? It was so...
Well, I mean, look at the planned government budget cuts to the housing budget. And, you know, you're talking hundreds of millions of pounds, and housing waiting lists are going up.
Yeah.
I mean, we did an FOI, Freedom of Information request, which found that the council housing waiting lists in Moray had gone up substantially, I think 15% plus in 2023.
Yeah.
And then also homelessness has gone up as well. So we were the first ones that have turned around and said, we need to declare a housing emergency in Moray because there's not enough houses. I mean, there's also even articles out there from letting agents like Clooney's who are saying there is not enough rental stock.
Yeah.
So if even the rental companies are saying that there's a problem here, and the council are showing that there's these massive numbers, we need to be declaring a housing emergency. So I wrote a letter to every single councillor asking them to back that and to write to the Scottish Government, and well, we'll see who replies.
Well, I remember watching a documentary in, I think it was about 2018, and some guy had actually went, sometimes this can come across as a bit condescending, but I actually really like this, is where they went homeless for a week at Christmas to actually go and like speak to people that were on the streets and stuff like that and experience what it's like. And they were given a stat at the start of the film of where they said, I think at the time, the population of homelessness in the UK almost matched the population of the city of Liverpool, which was, 6 years ago now. That's probably risen since, with stuff like mortgages and that have obviously became an issue, and the cost of living and stuff like that has came into the array as of the last couple of years.
It's one of the things that's going to be, and I've seen it from our conferences, it's going to be on our manifesto to build more houses, and that's council houses and private stock. We need more homes. We need more affordable homes. That goes for whether you're in Liverpool or whether you're right up in here in Moray, because there is a massive issue.
And there's a lot of stigma that's attached to it as well. Like, I remember going on holiday to Blackpool, and that was like my first kind of getting to see someone like being on the street, for lack of a better term, at like 9 years old. And, you know, I'd always been told about homeless people, and this is just from like older generations of family that are just, you know, lean more conservative. You know, that's just how things usually.
Don't worry, we won't hold it against you.
Yeah, but, I was always kind of told that people that were on the streets had maybe usually drunk money away or something like that. And when I was watching this documentary, one of the things that like really, really dawned on me is that a lot of stuff like addiction and that you maybe see homeless people going through actually starts when they become homeless and not results in them becoming homeless, which is...
Well, I mean, look at the way certain elements treat asylum seekers. People, a lot of these people are fleeing persecution in their own countries. You know, we have such a caring core of our society. I mean, during the Second World War, when we were housing refugees then, I think a lot of people, if those people who were there during that time who fought against such evil could see what's become of Britain now and being so prejudiced in these sort of areas against homeless people and asylum seekers, I think they would turn in their graves, if I'm honest. We need that more caring society. We need to be putting people first and solving the issues at the root. I
think it's these are issues that are weaponized for people's anger, and it's to direct that anger at those groups of people rather than the people that are in power at the time, right?
Yeah, I would totally agree with you. So
just before we move on to the US election, I'm realising I'm still trying to find the right balance between the heating in here. We're getting into spring.
Don't worry about it. I'm not complaining about that.
I'm just going to get on, just making sure that everything's okay and it's not too warm in here at the moment. But I can switch it off if we want me to quickly do that.
It's up to yourself. I don't mind.
Yeah, I'll make a cut. Don't worry.
Whilst that's happening, let us know in the comments, what is your favourite video game?
Well, we will get onto that as well. I do have that down here as well. So 2 seconds, even though I'm going to cut it. So, so yeah, the American election. Obviously, it's one of the biggest election years ever, if not the biggest. I think it's 2 billion people, something along the lines of that will be going to the polls around the globe this year. And then obviously in the Western world, us and the Americans are having our election probably around a similar type of time. The American election, I don't know if this is bad or not, but I always kind of see it and view it like WWE wrestling. It always seems a bit more over the top, and the show business too. It's more there than what the politics in this country would be, right? You know,
it can feel like the Super Bowl of politics.
It really is, yeah.
It's so polarizing as well. Like, we talk about our society, American politics is an entirely different beast.
So I've kind of described this as we're getting the rematch that no one wanted. Obviously, like, we've got Joe Biden, who, you know, is the president of the United States as of now. This has always been an issue when it came to his candidacy, with what was known as gaffes, but it does kind of seem like there is evidence of like some sort of cognitive decline there now, in terms of, you hear him in speeches, and he's I think last a couple of weeks he's referenced a few prime ministers of like Egypt and France, and there was one that the guy that he actually named was someone that died in 1975, and then there was, I think he got the Egyptian and the Mexican president mixed up. So there's a lot of kind of not anger, but very much worry on the left and the Democrat side in America, that he will be going up against, obviously, the Empire Strikes Back Sith Lord that's coming back to have another go. But
he doesn't have a big Darth Vader suit. I hope he doesn't, or a lightsaber. But
it's just, I really, like, for me with the American election, ever since 2016, because in 2016, I wasn't a fan of either candidate back then either. Like, I wasn't really a fan of Hillary Clinton, just with some of the policies. And I think it was something crazy, like she was against equal marriage up until 2013 or something. Wow. And then she tried to like roll it back and say that hadn't been the case. And then obviously we've got Donald Trump I remember him kind of first commentating on American politics, and it was he was behind that Barack Obama show us the birth certificate thing, right? He was kind of propagating that. And he was saying back then, I'm going to run for president. And I looked at him as like this reality TV star that had always been, acting, like he acts, and just thought it was like a PR stunt.
Yeah.
And even when he ran, I thought, he's not going to take this all the way. Like, he's just doing it to kind of, pander to the collection of people at the time that were following him. And then the morning of the results, going, wow, like, he won,
It's incredible to think that they're going to be squaring off, and I think it just shows how far the Republican Party has fallen to be putting somebody who's going through some of the prosecutions that have been going on against legal cases. It's such a bizarre situation. I mean, it's hard not to think back to the Capitol riots and be concerned about what is going to happen in the American politics, because
regardless of the result,
absolutely, regardless of what way it goes, it has become already. Now the American system is also a flawed first past the post system.
Very much so.
Yeah, I mean, we've got similar problems over here, but it's interesting to see where the dividing lines are already going. I mean, the Democrats are very much fighting against abortion rights being taken away. It's something they fought the midterms on fairly successfully. And Trump's very much going back down the really concerning rhetoric. It's a worry. I think most people would say that. It's hard not to even look at our own shores to make sure that we're, trying to get our own election right as well. Who knows what's going to happen over there? I do think that as much as Biden's approval ratings haven't been the most glamorous, I think there's going to be a fight back there. I mean, we've seen it in the start with the State of the Union address. So I think there will be a bite back. But I think it's going to be really hard to call that one election, especially given how states can flip and how much a state like Iowa or Florida matters in the whole grand scheme of it. Thankfully, we're not electoral college up here, so we're not giving anybody.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. You mentioned the system there, and it's like, it blew my mind because I was kind of made aware of this first when Trump actually won. He didn't actually win the popular vote that year.
No, he didn't.
It was the electoral college where it's a point system where Hillary had actually got more votes. But it's a mind blowing thing to think, because we've always been used to, however things have went, the most votes wins.
Yeah.
Where that isn't the case.
Well, again, it's that first past the post nature, isn't it? And
Yeah.
if we can't even criticise too heavily, because it's very similar over here, where specific communities, specific constituencies, the votes are a lot closer and mean that bit more. And, you know, everybody's vote should matter. Everybody's.
And it's crazy to think how many things that, like, he, even in like 2016, where I remember him saying stuff like, I'm not sure about this election, if it's going to be fair or not. You know, he was already kind of putting that. And
I think there's already seeds of doubt of that already.
And especially, I mean, the 2020 one, he said it in the debates, like, because he brought up the whole mail-in ballots, because it was obviously there was restrictions at the time. And, like, in a way, I think he's been quite clever there, because I think he kind of knew how it was going to go with the people that were going to vote for him, most likely would not be listening to advice on COVID and things of that nature, or would be very sceptical of COVID restrictions, so would go out and vote in person. And then when the ballots that came in via mail, which would probably lean more Democrat, would come in, he could then say, like, oh, look what they've tried to, you know, whatever he came out with, you know. It's
very much of that specific polarising characters rhetoric to make it about the integrity of electoral systems. And I mean, look at what's happened over here. We have had voter ID reform, which is, I believe the estimates are hundreds of millions of pounds. And do you know how many cases of voter ID there were in Scotland in the 2019 general election?
Yeah, it was very small numbers, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, one. Like, we're putting money into that, which will, most experts are already warning, is going to disenfranchise a lot of people voting. It happened in the English local council elections. There were issues of people not having the sufficient ID, and yet that's been one of the priorities during a cost of living crisis.
Yeah,
come on. You know?
Well, I think I've seen a good thing on Have I Got News for You, their Facebook page. I think it was when Matt Hancock was was he the health secretary? I don't know why we comment on this if he was the health secretary, but he was saying one case of voter ID fraud was too many, and then Have I Got News for You said the 50,000 population of homeless people wanted to have a word or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, it was some satire with that. But yeah, the thing is with Trump, and probably especially with Boris as well, is that there's almost like a kind of disarming element to them, because they almost kind of come across like comedy acts. Like, it's hard to take seriously just because of how out there it is. Like, you know, my first memory of Johnson, for instance, was the 2012 Olympics, where he's going down that zip line with
he got stuck. Yeah,
and I remember people, because I would have been in high school at this time, people going, you know, Boris Johnson for Prime Minister, and like then you actually see the fruits of the labour of that actually becoming reality. And then, you know, like the Trump stuff. I mean, the scary stuff about it was definitely the 2020 his reaction to 2020 of where he did the fake elector scheme. He contested, I think, every state with lawyers that he put in place, which also found that there wasn't enough evidence, or there was no voter fraud. And then obviously the January 6th thing happened, which, have you ever seen the New York Times documentary on that? I
don't think I've seen that one. I have seen documentaries on it. It's on really YouTube. Hard to watch.
It is completely like fascinating, because it shows what people, you know, how I was mentioned that whole kind of tribalism of overlooking logic to just defend your side, like, you know, the Republican side, or the Trump side, I guess, because I think those two things can be separate. Like, not only have the Republican Party fallen, it almost feels like they're almost like a bit of a prisoner to him at the moment. Like,
I mean, look at how Republicans get treated when they speak out against Trump.
Yeah.
Some of the hate that comes from these really, really passionate people that, like you say, tend to defy logic. You know, political parties exist to have debate. I mean, different parties have different systems of doing that. We have very much a member-led conferences. People can watch them back on YouTube and see how people voted and see the debates. Some parties don't do that. But yeah, to see such hatred, even directed at your own people, just because they have a different point of view, bizarre. And I hope this general election can be a turning point for us over here to move away from that toxic political side. But we'll have to wait and see.
And I suppose people will kind of be like, why are we even talking about the American election? But there's someone described it brilliantly of if America sneezes, Britain catches a cold. Like, what happens over there matters over here. Do you know what I mean? Like, just geopolitically and the alliances, whether it be NATO or
there's historical
the Paris Accords, stuff like that. And I mean, just like that January 6th, I remember waking up to that because obviously, like a national lockdown had just kind of been implemented over here again.
Aye.
And I woke up and that was the first thing that I was like seeing on the news, and it was just like, this is crazy. And you've seen like people that would, you know, kind of put out there that they are law and order and respect the police, because obviously there had been like very much division, you know, early into the COVID stuff with you know, police and so, you know, social justice and all these types of things that were going on at the time. But you would see them like with T-shirts like Blue Lives Matter, and they would be attacking police officers.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, like it tried to put it out like it was working class people were angry. When in this documentary, it shows a lot of these people were not like working class people. They were like very well off. Like there was one family like flew on a private jet to be at the protest and then break into the Capitol.
I mean, he seems to be able to really rile up specific demographics. There's no doubt about that. I mean, you even look closer to our own shores and the illegal proroguing of Parliament by Boris because he didn't get his own way.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not on that level, but taking advantage of the systems because you don't get your own way. And then looking at things like the Fixed Term Parliaments Act, which was a really good piece of legislation which allowed voter clarity of when elections are going to be, to take things like that away, steps in the wrong direction. Yeah. I feel like the theme here is pretty much we need to be so careful with what it can be a very fragile democracy, especially with systems that we have which are so flawed. We need to get them right. That's the main thing. We really need to get these things reformed.
I think the one thing above, I mean, there's a lot of crazy stuff when it comes to the US election in many different fronts, but the thing that just takes the cake for me is that it is still possible that he could become president again, be convicted, be jailed. He could pardon himself, I think, at a federal level, but at a state level he couldn't. And like, for example, if he was to go to prison in New York, I think that's still a blue state, so he wouldn't be able, like, he would have to be the president from jail. Very unlikely that is going to be. The fact that it's even possible,
it's bizarre.
Is bizarre. Yeah,
it really shows how society has gone.
Yeah, and the fact that, like, I think if you have a felony in America, you can't vote, but you could still
run for president. Yeah, I did see something about that.
So, but anyway, we'll move on from politics because I know that we're already at like the hour 10 mark, and I do want to get into mental health, right? I know that you've been quite an activist on this for quite a while. I hope you don't mind me bringing this up, but one of the stories I've seen was this is actually quite a close thing for you because you actually lost like a teammate in rugby, you know, through a kind of mental health. When did you kind of start talking about these sorts of things? Was it alongside being in the kind of politics side of it, or?
I think it's always been something that's been really, really important to me. I'm a big believer in sport being a really positive influence to get people talking about their mental health. I mean, my partner jokes with me that men play golf so that they can talk about their mental health. You know, there's a logic in that. I mean, we look local to home. There's the Moray Mental Health Football Club, who are an amazing team, and please, I think anybody should get involved in them if they can, especially if they're struggling, because they've really helped change people's lives. I think that for me, I mean, it's always been something I've been really passionate about. Sport is always something that's been part of my life. I played rugby since I was, a kid. And when I think that kind of moment, as much as it's difficult to bring up, was really a kind of defining point for me to being able to speak about it. Full disclosure, I was basically making tea in my flat at the time. It was middle of lockdown, so I hadn't seen my teammates for a long time. We hadn't played rugby for a long time. And just I think I was making fajitas or something. I can't really remember. I get a ping on the phone, and as a young guy, everybody does. You go and check what the notification's about. And the news came through on our Facebook group, and yeah, it just made me think. It was horrible, and I think everybody's had their own mental health struggles at some point in their life. But I still remember, speaking to him not long after a game where he was beating himself up for, silly mistakes. Like, anybody makes mistakes in a rugby field, and I'm no different to that. I'm sure my teammates could attest to that. I just remember putting an arm around him and saying, it's going to be all right. And yeah, we chatted, had a pint, and he seemed much chirpier, but I didn't think, a year and a half later, he wouldn't be here. And that was a real hammer blow, if I'm honest. And yeah, whilst it's emotionally difficult for me to talk about, I think people need to be aware of their mental health. And I think as a country, we need to be doing a lot more. Like, tying it back locally, we found that there was no mental health workers in any GP practice in Moray for another freedom of information request. And it takes a lot to annoy me, to really anger me in any sense. But it's infuriating. I mean, we talked about mothers having to give birth in Aberdeen and Inverness going along the A96. Imagine you're in a mental health crisis and you're told, you need to go to Raigmore, which is an hour down the road, or you have to go to Aberdeen, which is an hour and a half down the road, on a dangerous road, an isolated road. God knows what the weather is. It's tragic, and I hope that the situation will change, because mental health is something I think a lot of people are becoming a lot more aware of, and men's mental health, particularly men, historically, it's very true, struggle to talk about these things. I can be stubborn myself and not talk about them a lot of the time, and I've changed that attitude a lot. So seeing things like Moray Mental Health Football Club is incredible to see in the face of such horror and such upset, something really positive coming out of that. And they themselves will even say, a Moray Mental Health Football Club should not have to exist.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We should have these things in our society. We should have support available to anybody who needs it. But unfortunately, there is a need.
Can I actually just read you something? I was actually going to... I'm still hoping to have this person on, but I think it's just appropriate to bring up now because it's kind of relating to what you're saying. But I believe she's a former counsellor, Carol Ralph. So basically what I'd seen is there was a post from Moray Wellbeing Hub that were which also do a lot of great work.
They do. Really do.
And they were kind of asking for people's kind of local input of what they would like to see and what they think could be adjusted, would be better put in place for the local area at least. I'm going to try my best to find this. It is in the mountain of
we will put some theme tune music. We'll be back after this break.
But, I think just going what you're saying there with like sports clubs and stuff like that, I think obviously it gives people the ability to talk and stuff like that, of course, but I also think camaraderie is a real big part of it, right? I think, not all the time, but I think you can, when someone is going through like a mental health crisis and it does get quite bad, there's usually like an element of isolation there as well, right? Whether it's from like being self-isolating or, circumstances, right?
Yeah.
But in terms, I'm totally on board with what you're saying with, I think, on a health service level, obviously you're mentioning Moray there, but it probably applies to like a national situation as well, of that more needs to be done. Like that, I mentioned to you before we came on that I did a documentary, and that was surrounding so basically what had happened was I'd been made aware of a situation, and I just heard the same thing over and over again about people that are on the autistic spectrum in the local area maybe not getting the adequate support. So me and a filmmaking buddy at the time decided to kind of go and explore that. And, that was one of the things that was brought up the most, is that like some people were at crisis point and like they didn't, they were either told, well, there's this service in Inverness or there's this service in Aberdeen, but they would reach out to that and like, you're not in a catchment area, and it's like, what are you meant to do in those scenarios? And
we need the healthcare localised as much as possible, and mental health needs to be brought in line with physical health. There's no doubt about it.
100%.
It's one of the big things in our kind of Fair Deal for Health sort of manifesto, and it's something I'm really, really passionate about, and I think I'd really encourage other parties to try and get on the same wavelength as it, because I think we are becoming a lot more aware of it. And I mean, you look at the pandemic and that horrible situation, that person had their local sports club as their support group. That was their, their hobby, their life. And then, unfortunately, and I hope, touch wood, we do not have another pandemic. But what if something like that is taken away from someone and doesn't have that? It means that crisis points don't have that output to try and mediate, to try and talk someone down from the edge. And it's a struggle to see the positivity in a lot of these bits, but I am hoping that things will change with that soon. I really do.
I think if there's a positive to take out the pandemic, it definitely made people more aware of what mental health is. And obviously, of course, it was something that was on the rise and becoming more of an issue and a problem in terms of numbers and stuff like that way before the pandemic even started. But obviously the pandemic, with obviously the stress of the situation, life changing, all these different kind of factors that would play into it, like obviously the isolation side of things. Like, I don't know about you, but me personally, like, I would keep in touch with friends via, Zoom meetings and stuff like that.
Everybody had the Zoom quiz, didn't they?
Almost like you kind of zoned out after a while, though, because it there's like a firewall to speaking to someone through a computer rather than in person. We
played a lot of video games.
Yeah.
We played things like Call of Duty Warzone, like that was big at the time. We played Fortnite, we played all these kind of games. My gamer hours definitely went up during this. Well,
I think the entire world did.
It was a release for me, and it was brilliant in that way.
Right, I'm going to have to... So basically, what Carol was saying, I was trying to quote her word from word there, but amongst the screenshots for my calendar and stuff like that, it's lost in the wind. But she was basically saying that the burden, not the burden, but like the responsibility shouldn't have to be put, like you were just kind of mentioning about the Moray Mental Health Football Club, that these things shouldn't exist, that these things there should be more access to counselling, more less waiting lists to the health service to be able to offer stuff to people that are in I remember, I won't say who they are, obviously, of confidentiality, but I remember going to visit someone in I guess the psychiatric ward would be the correct term for it.
Yeah.
And I remember kind of coming out of there, and I just remember asking myself, I wonder how many people that are obviously having a bad time or are in there for their own safety and whatnot, I wonder how many people have reached out for mental health support before and, been turned away, or there's nothing we can do, and then it has got to that kind of crisis point, to the fact of where these people that are in the ward at the time, and that there's not like a date where they get out that's on a rolling basis, and it becomes like a review thing, so. Well,
I remember diverting any panic straight away. It was very minor crisis when I was a student at Glasgow Caledonian, but I had a bit of bad mental health. I'm not afraid to admit that. So I phoned up the local GP, as you do, and I was told that a service would get in touch with me. I'm still waiting for that phone call.
Yeah.
And that's, years ago. I am very, very lucky that I've had some incredible people support me in my life, and I still do. But what if I didn't?
Yeah.
I can't even think how long I've been waiting for that phone call, to be honest.
And how disheartening that might be for someone that doesn't have that support network around them, right? I actually, one of the things when I was looking up a little bit of research on Alex was one of the recent things that he talked about was the breathing service that's through the NHS. So that's a mental health kind of chat line, talk line, I guess. But they had a web chat version as well, because sometimes it might be an intimidating thing, even though it is a stranger, it's all confidential and that, to pick up the phone and talk about these things, where a web chat thing's a little less intimidating for some people and that. but I think he was bringing up the point that it was a service that was run on a very low budget. I think it was something like £50,000 a year, which is, in the grand scheme of things is...
and it's a really important service too. I mean, all the don't get me wrong, I am sure the people within the NHS, within these who work in mental health, do an incredible job, a very, very challenging job. They need more support. I mean, the budget got frozen this year, which on the face of it may seem like, oh, the budget was protected, but that means a real terms cuts because the cost of everything is going up, and there already isn't enough mental health support across the country, especially up here and in rural areas. I mean, there needs to be significant investment, and we do need to change the dial. It needs to be brought in line with physical health.
I think it's important to point out, though, we had Will Hall. He started up a talk club in Elgin. It's actually the only talk club in the entirety of Scotland.
Amazing.
Amazing guy. I think he was, I believe he was a rower. It's so long since we had him. I think it was like September. But like for weeks, no one was coming. And not just from probably trying to promote it as well. I think it's a very intimidating prospect to maybe turn up to like an environment like that. But through, I think the Press and Journal did an article on him, and then more people started showing up. And that's
was that the thing at Elgin City?
Yeah,
the football club. Yeah, I think I did see that.
And like it's literally as simple as they go in and they rate themselves 1 to 10 in terms of how they're feeling that day before they start the meeting, and then after they might go out, have a walk, throw a frisbee around. But it's that whole kind of camaraderie, like you mentioned, the mental health football club. I know Lossie's Men's Shed's another one that So it's great that there's these people that are taking the initiative on this to help as much as they can, but obviously...
and local journalists who are covering it as well to make
100%.
It well, because it's not easy to advertise in today's today's world. So these great local journalists who have been covering these things are done a brilliant job.
Like I mentioned with that documentary there, the biggest... So I think the average age of life expectancy for someone with autism in the UK is 54. If that's then paired with a learning disability or what's classed as severe autism, but I don't exactly know what that means, to be fair, I think it becomes 38 and a half, and the biggest cause of death is suicide in that population as well, so like it's a crisis on all fronts, whether it be younger people, will it be men, will it be people that are in a certain kind of...
I don't want to add to your fire here as well, but we still don't know the final implications of the pandemic
100%, yeah. 100%. I think it's something that's going to have such a long-term effect. Yeah. Like even, people that are very young, we don't know what their kind of memory of that's going to be, or there's trauma that will present itself in later down the line from...
If I could honestly pick a couple of things, like one or two, the top things that I could change tomorrow.
That's actually one of my questions, so thank you for answering it.
Do you want me to save it for
No, go for it, man.
If I could change, doesn't matter if in this election, I hope people do place their trust in me to be their MP. But if I didn't manage to get over that line, but I did manage to have just the smallest little bit of influence on bringing mental health workers to Moray and more localised, I would be so proud. That would be... I am so glad that I've been able to build a local campaign on issues like this and been empowered by my party to be able to build it on the things that matter the most to us. So achieving that, getting things like... Well, I mean, it all comes back to healthcare and local healthcare provision, like the maternity services. And I believe this is a similar situation looking down Aviemore way as well. I mean, it is a big constituency when you think about it, as we were talking about earlier. So bringing localised healthcare, particularly mental health and things like maternity care, I think would be, I'd be able to rest easy knowing that I'd have some small impact. So I'm hoping that I can just keep bringing the message up.
100%. Rugby. I don't know what it is with Scotland, man. Like every Six Nations, they tease us. They think we'll get the opening game against England
it's
one.
The hope that kills you.
And then Italy, right out the window. I mean, for years, like I even remember I think it was the 2015 World Cup. Like we thought we had a really good chance of going very deep into the tournament, and it's just always kind of like Scotland have always had a very consistently good rugby side, in my opinion. You know what I mean? It's
we had some banter years in there as well.
Yeah, for sure. Maybe not as much as like the footballs, like I'm kind of comparing it to, but yeah, it's just like obviously like there's the whole kind of you know, obviously there's the healthy and the ugly side of rivalry between Scotland and England, I'm sure, but you know, we managed to obviously beat England the last, I think it's 3 or 4 times in the rugby, and it just seems to be
6 and 7 years, I believe.
Just like beating everyone else. It seems to be the.
Well, I tell you, it's when we think about it this way. I mean, call me the eternal optimist. I'm very much of the Brian Clough philosophy, where I always believe, believe in fairies and everything else. I do think Scotland have made significant progress.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. I mean, some of the things Finn Russell can do is just, how do you even think of that? Do you know? And to think we were only a few points away from possibly winning a Triple Crown and being the best in Britain and Ireland, that's pretty good going, you know. That was a long way off not that long ago. I think it'll be interesting to see in the next couple of years, because we seem to be producing a lot of more interesting, talent, entertaining players. So as much as, heartache again this time, I'm still fairly positive.
I think for me, like, I think it was a couple of years ago where Ireland won it on St. Patrick's Day, and just seeing the joy that set, like, that country, I want that for this country. So I guess it's my impatience to for our time at the top. And
we've got the talent to do it.
Yeah, 100%.
We do have the talent to do it, and I think we've proved that. I mean, one refereeing decision away from France, who, to be fair, are an incredible rugby nation. Beating England, beating Wales, like, these are tough teams to beat, and now Italy all of a sudden are an incredible.
I know, where did that come out of? That was like a guaranteed win back in the day.
I don't know about guaranteed as particular. There's never a win guaranteed as a Scotland rugby fan, but they are. I think this Six Nations has really shown that anybody now can beat anybody, and that is so exciting. For
100%.
And
do you keep up with club rugby as well, or?
I play with Moray Rugby Club as well, so I have to keep up with club rugby. And
are you more of a union or a league fan?
Probably more union. I have played rugby league. I actually played rugby league for Scotland under 18s, and I was meant to play for the Scotland students team before I broke my arm. Ironically, I've still got the scars from that playing rugby union. Ironically, so I probably do lean a wee bit more towards union, but I have played rugby league. Because
the first time that I proper kind of got into rugby was, do you remember the Harlequins blood capsule gate, like that?
I do remember
and that was just because it was on the news so much that I actually took, because Harlequins, that's union, and then league is more like Leeds Rhinos and St Helens and that. But then I got really into rugby league because it was the one that was on Sky Sports the most. But like seeing like the French teams in the Heineken Cup and Union, Ulster and Munster back in the day used to be a great watch as well. And obviously I remember like the likes of Johnny Wilkinson, the England player.
One of the most incredible rugby brains. I mean, all right, there was one moment during the World Cup where he maybe went off on a bit of a tangent, but listening to him as an analyst now, I find really interesting, because that guy went to whole new heights with the England rugby team. There's no doubt about it, regardless of the fact it wasn't Scotland. But I've always kind of followed club rugby. I'm an Edinburgh fan. I was born in Edinburgh, so that's the natural leanings, although I don't begrudge Glasgow doing well, having lived there for a big part of my life. And more locally, seeing the strides that we as a rugby club at Moray are doing is incredible, because we got promoted last year and we're doing really, really well again this year. And then we've got to play some teams from the Central Belt to try and get promoted.
Oh, awesome.
So we've got Grangemouth, Dundee and Panmure we need to play next.
It's even like seeing Murrayfield, like obviously a lot of the time when you hear about stadiums and that in the UK, it's always around football, isn't it? It's whether it's Hampden or Wembley or, Old Trafford and bigger club stadiums and that. But the rugby stadiums are so impressive as well. Your Murrayfields, your Twickenhams. Yeah,
no, absolutely. Murrayfield's an incredible stadium. They're putting investment into the tram line and that there now, and it's so much more accessible. We have, I'm maybe leaning a wee bit into my sport and culture brief here, but we have world-class facilities. We need to be doing a lot more in some ways to really be, motivating the next generation. And I think we've got a really rich sporting heritage and culture. I think, you see it even on Old Firm days, you see the passion for good and bad reasons.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah,
but we are a very sporting culture, and I think some people can maybe move away and think that Scotland's not that active and sporty, but we really are.
Yeah, I mean, well, the guy that broke the Wimbledon duck, Scottish from Dunblane.
From Dunblane, Andy Murray, who, believe me, it used to always be very difficult for me to speak about coming from Dunblane. I used to sometimes say, I came from Stirling, which is just down the road, because whenever you would say that, for the very reasons you kind of hint at, people were always like, oh, that's where that horrible tragedy happened. Whereas now there's a sense of pride because a lot of people remember that Andy and Jamie Murray and Judy Murray, should say as well, are from there. And it's such a nice, refreshing dynamic change that I think, Andy Murray's done some incredible things for that community.
Yeah, and it's awesome because I remember when I was kind of first getting into politics, I watched a lot of Mock the Week, and the tennis players would be the butt of the joke a lot of the time on that scenes we'd like to see. And I think Frankie Boyle made a joke that as the Scottish man wins Wimbledon, the ground swallows him whole. And then it was 4 years later or something when he won the first one, and it was because it was 80 years or something that it had been since the last person from the UK player, to actually win the tournament.
It was an incredible feat. I still remember it to this day, and I remember giving it a right, celebrating it. And
I produce a football podcast in here, and they're constantly on about the resurgence of Scottish football players in the Premier League now. You've got your Andy Robertson, who plays for Liverpool. He had a game at Borough Briggs 10 years ago for Clyde. You know what I mean?
He turned out against Stirling Albion at one point. It's incredible. The hard work and effort of a lot of these players. I still remember John McGinn playing for Hibs in the Scottish Cup final. There's a lot of great talent coming out of it. Do I think there's probably some fundamental things I'd like to see changed? Probably, but there is a bit of a renaissance in Scottish sport, and it's really exciting to see. I mean, we're going off to the Euros.
I know.
I mean, it's back-to-back European champions, and we're playing the hosts in the first game. I know. How exciting!
And they've not been great at major tournaments recently, so I'm not trying to predict an upset already, but I think for Euro 2021, but what was Euro 2020, even though it was great to have it on home soil when games at Hampden and that, even though they didn't exactly go our way, even just to see Scotland at a major tournament, something I'd never seen in my lifetime, because the last one was 1998 in France, even just to see a score, and I know it was still kind of reduced capacity at that time due to COVID.
Aye, and don't even underplay the fact, seeing the Scottish women's team getting to major tournaments, they have had an incredible impact. The women's game is going from strength to strength. I mean, it's still going for that, but the amount of young girls playing football now, my niece is one of them, and it's incredible to see.
Well, funnily enough, on the football journals we had Alan Main in. They used to play for Dundee United back in the days. I
heard the name was stand in the ground after him.
Yeah, but a local guy, Lossy guy. He's he actually does one-to-one coaching now and stuff like that. He's actually I think he's coaching Moray girls, so
fantastic.
It's good to see that Murray's future goalkeepers are in the best hands possible, quite literally.
Quite literally, say fans.
Right, we are getting on, so we'll get on to the
nitty gritty.
How did you get involved in video game design?
Oh, so I originally did robotic engineering at Glasgow Caledonian University.
All right, okay.
I love robots. Really, really cool stuff.
Were you into Robot Wars back in the day?
I was, actually. I really was.
Show.
It was brilliant. I wish they'd kept the renewal going, but maybe we'll see a comeback. I hope so. But unfortunately, with that course, it may be different now, but a lot of the graduates were going into work for places like BAE and weapons. I mean, we've talked about my background already. I am not somebody who wants to build weapons for a career. So I was very disgruntled for a bit. I took some time out. I actually went into student politics, and I was a vice president at Glasgow Cali, where we managed to do quite a lot of stuff. We managed to do, ironically, we launched a sports brand eventually. We did sports strategy, so again, lean into that, and we did a lot of stuff around, student engagement and things. So when that year out, I took a lot of time to kind of reflect on where I wanted to go, and I was always told growing up, I played video games my entire life. You know, I could, I will happily, it's another podcast, I will talk about video games till the cows come home. Big MMO and RPG player and strategy player now. I was still playing a lot of video games when I was at uni, and it basically, they had a good course leader who I'd met through my student politics, because I'd worked with them as part of the engineering department. And I went to a master talk with a guy, I think it was Richard Lemerchand, and the way he talked about video games just really spoke to me, how it can be just so much more than just, you know, sitting idly and playing. Like, and there's a whole subject of things like serious games, and I do a research PhD with Brunel University in my free time on game design with sports decision making with rugby. And I, back then, basically asked the question, could I course transfer? And I did. And it all kind of stemmed from there. And I got a job at Dovetail Games. We're an amazing company. Gave me my first break with QA testing. So I literally tested things like Train Simulator.
Yeah, awesome.
I know. Yeah, there's only so many times you can do the Glasgow to Edinburgh route. And it gave me an opportunity to live in England and see a whole different culture and different area. And now I got the job at Hunted Cow after getting my final degree from University of Greenwich, and we're working on some really cool titles. Like, I could go into, like, we've got a game that's coming out, we can now talk about it now because we've announced it, Godzilla X Kong, Titan Chasers, which should be coming out soon. And working with, you know, these massive, the Monsterverse franchise is so cool. Like, I've had a lot of fun learning and designing these things so we can, and seeing people, you know, test it and see how the systems interact is just awesome. Like, games do have such a power over people.
And it's amazing to see how much the industry has grown over the last 20 years, of where, like, some of the premieres for games, obviously like AAA titles and stuff like that, are like Hollywood movie premieres now. You
just
know?
At the weekend we had the Moray Game Jam, which was just over the weekend at
that's
UHI.
hosted at the college, I believe, isn't it? I've seen the posters for it and stuff in passing.
It's a great future game jams are a brilliant way to even just get a sampling of what it's like. Even if you have no game design experience or programming background, it's a great way to kind of see a bit of what goes into making a video game.
So, I mean, it's such a success in Scotland as well. Like, it's such a big thing, right? Obviously, like, the obvious one is, you know, Rockstar North and, like, Grand Theft Auto being, like, this just phenomenon, right? In terms of, like, you've seen, like, what was it, the trailer for the new one got, it was like 83 million views in the space of, like, 24 hours or something like that, you know? Funnily enough, a guy from Moray was one of the kind of lead designers on the original, I'm trying to remember, is Leslie Benzies, there we go.
There you go.
And obviously Dundee's a big, like, haven for it. They've got a bunch of studios up here, obviously Hunted Cow. So it's awesome to see, like, that Scotland, like, contributes to something that is the present and obviously the future as well.
Exactly. It's the games industry is a huge thing for me, and it kind of, again, it actually ties into my sport and culture brief being within digital media. So we've got Rockstar, there's new studios such as Build a Rocket Boy in Edinburgh as well. There's so many examples of it. Does the industry have clear issues that we need to look at? Things like crunch culture, which is really endemic in the video game culture. Yeah, we do need to be looking at some of the issues with that, faces with that, but it's such an exciting time to be part of the industry. It really is.
And I think, like, one thing for me, like, as someone that is, I'm more of like a casual enjoyer now. Like, you know what I got recently?
What is it you've been playing? Go on, tell me.
I invested in a Steam Deck.
Good,
I didn't have anything.
I've got one.
I traded something in because I was just editing all the time, you know. So I was like, there's money sitting on my desk that I could be using in my pocket at the moment.
Have you plugged it into a monitor and used it as a second computer yet? Oh, that's brilliant.
I'm still kind of getting to grips with the whole thing, but I'm on the go quite a lot, just with stuff with work. I mentioned I was like on the trains a lot to like Aberdeen and stuff for different things. And I was like, it's pretty cool because, like, sometimes a train from Aberdeen to Elgin, if there's delays and stuff like that, can be 2 hours. Do you know what I mean? There's a lot of time to kill.
And that's a whole other local issue that needs sorted as well.
100%. But, like, I was just thinking, I actually want something that I can use to, like, kill time like that. But I've been finding that I've been using it, like, a lot more, almost not dangerously so, but, like, when I first got it, I just found it amazing that, like, there's this whole array of games. There's no limitations like for a console. It's limited by generations, right? And they never put backwards compatibility in. Whereas like, I'm trying to think. I played the original Max Payne. Like,
it's got the entire. So people who don't know, it's got you can have your entire Steam library. There are some games that don't work with it. But it is an incredible piece of kit. I got mine about a year and a bit ago, and I've never looked back. I use it as a portable desktop effectively and plug it into a second screen. It's really, really handy that you can put in an SD card and load up Windows on it. Oh, I could go into the nerd on this. No Man's Sky is a fantastic game on it. Really do recommend that. And they're going to be releasing, Hello Games are releasing, I think it's Light No Fire, they've just announced. Which looks incredible. Oh, honestly,
that game had a bit of a struggle to begin with, right? It was such a big project, and then it kind of had a bit of a dodgy release, but over time it
had a difficult period, and a lot of people went away from it, and they had to rebuild their base, and then they had to really go from there. Does it sound familiar?
But I think, what was it? I think I had a PlayStation until the 2022 or something like that. And I'd kind of started to see that because like Sony's really known for the exclusive things, and that's like a strong selling point. I'm not a fan of it. Like I was a big fan of like the Spider-Man game that they made, right? Because the only person that would have enjoyed that more is like 7-year-old me.
I was a big Spider-Man fan as well.
I was seeing Tony Todd, who was like the stars that they get in like these narrative-driven games now. You know, he was a guy who was in Candyman. You know, he was in I think he was in Platoon all those years ago as well. They've got him to voice Venom, and I've seen a clip, and it seems like the perfect match in history. But he was like, they cut 90% of my lines. And it turned out that Insomniac Games, who have killed it on that front for years, Sony had pressured them to get the game out for 2023, so Sony had an exclusive, but there was meant to be so much more added to that. So I could kind of see stuff like that coming down the road, where I was like, I'll just come back to that. But the Steam Deck's amazing because it's like there's the modern side of it and the classics. You know?
I mean, like the industry in itself is going through a massive transitional phase with. I mean, you talked about the exclusive nature. I mean, Xbox. I've got an Xbox. We got an Xbox basically because of Game Pass, and that as that live subscription service has completely changed the game.
Yeah, revolutionary.
And it'll be interesting to see how things develop from that. I think, especially with things like the Rogue Ally coming in as a Steam Deck competitor. Oh, I could, this is a whole other different separate podcast, but I could go on about this. I am a massive Steam Deck fan.
I think obviously the Rogue Ally you mentioned, and I think it's the Legion Go, that's Lenovo's.
Yeah, that's their equivalent. They've just come out.
They look cool and everything, and I suppose I think they're like better resolution, better frame rate and everything, but I think the battery life they've not been able to nail yet.
It's an interesting one. It's like anything else. Like you look at smartphones, they take inspiration from there. So they've seen the working formula for Steam Deck, and you can see the similarities. And I think it's definitely interesting to see how the industry is going to go develop. And I'm excited to be part of that in some small way. It
just blows my mind that because I remember like handhelds to me were like Game Boy Advances, PlayStation Portables, I guess, even to an extent. Now to see like you could play, for example, Elden Ring. That's I'm
on day one.
And supported. You could, I think it's like 30, 40 frames a second, but still, do you know what I mean? An incredible achievement in that. I mean, I've sunk too much time into that game. I'm a bit of a Souls fan, but
I think I'm on Crusader Kings and Football Manager. I'm in a very good Football Manager save at the moment.
I do have a question about Football Manager.
Go on
later on.
Oh, okay.
Well, I'll get these are pretty to the point questions for this, and then we'll get into Football Manager. So, first one: what has been your favourite title you've played in the last 12 months?
Favourite game? Ooh, there's getting the really hard questions in now, aren't we? I have maybe the classic politician thing. I don't know if I can give one clear answer to that. So I have really been playing a lot of F1 Manager, actually, from Frontier Games, Frontier Development, sorry. I'm a big F1 fan. Data-driven strategy management games are huge for me, so I've really been enjoying seeing where they're going from. Very much inspired by Football Manager. Lots of stuff I'd like to see. They've just announced that they're going to have a build your own team mode in the next one, which sounds exciting, and it makes me not want to start a new save again. But on the current game, I should say there. but I've been playing a lot of that. But I've also been playing a lot of things like Crusader Kings and going back to Football Manager. Crusader Kings 3, for me, combining strategy and RPG in that way, where you have these characters and you're trying to go and take over the world or whatever it is your goal is. And then they have a massive modding community. Like I just downloaded a Game of Thrones, I think it's called The Song of Ice and Fire, which is a Game of Thrones mod for that. And it just takes Crusader Kings into an RPG strategy element for that franchise, and it's been brilliant fun. And there's also a Lord of the Rings one, which I'm going to go probably touch after playing a wee bit more of the Game of Thrones one. So those are probably the main ones for me.
The Steam sales are dangerous as well. Like I have to avoid like when it starts throwing £3 in your face everywhere for like bundles of 4 games. And
we're all guilty of it. We're all guilty of it.
But yeah, I guess so. I guess it's only fair if I give my one.
Please, no.
I'm going to go with Resident Evil 4 remake because it's one of my favorite games of all time. The original.
We are terrible in our house for what we can't play horror because it's too jump scary for it, but we watch silent playthroughs of it.
Yeah, all right.
Which is really is our kind of downtime, so we can just about stomach that. Resident Evil is a great franchise.
Yeah, it's I actually do have the whole thing on my Steam library. I will get round to doing it. More trains to get on and kill time on. But so yeah, the next one is, what is your favorite title of all time?
Football Manager is probably the one that keeps coming back up, but I was a big MMO player, so things like World of Warcraft. But the one actually instead of that for me, I also played a lot of RuneScape actually. But I played a lot.
Who didn't?
I know, right? They did a lot of cool stuff with the old school RuneScape rehashing, which is really really cool. And they do a lot of community and fan engagement where they do voting based on bringing in new features, really bringing power to that community. So there you go. If Lib Dem embodiment within a video game, I probably would say Lord of the Rings Online was probably one of the games I spent a lot of time with, particularly at the time of life, coming through high school and into university, trying to find myself, and then also having community part of that, and then also the Lord of the Rings IP just for good balance. They really did a lot of good stuff with that franchise in that game. But Football Manager I always go back to no matter what. I don't have as much time for MMOs anymore.
Funny you should say that. Lee will be a fan of this question because we're all Football Manager buffs and this side of the world. We did an online save, and we kind of took ages to kind of decide what league we were going in and figure out times because usually the evening. And I was thinking, are we going to stream this? I thought it would be a fun little side thing to put out there for like listeners and stuff, whoever may be interested in it. But he's lucky it didn't go down like that because I was Lazio. He was he chose the league, and then we did like a draw. And funnily enough, we got the Rome derby, which I'm
sure that was fun.
Yeah, well, I let the hounds out. I had to take the hounds off of him in some of the games. You've got. To be fair, he did call me a vampire in the press conference, so I needed to let him know that wasn't acceptable. And when you've got people texting you during the game that all my goals were offside, you know that you've royally won the battle and the war on all fronts. But
you've been FM'd.
yes, definitely. And the thing is, I haven't seen a sale enough because I am a cheapskate, but I do like the feeling of getting. I'm like, if I wait and bide my time, I will get it for a great deal. So I have not bought this year's version of the game yet.
Having played this year's version of the game, I definitely think it's worth putting some money into the good people of Sports Interactive, who are a fantastic UK-based game 100%. Developer.
And I know they've added features like you can carry over last year's game save to this year and stuff like that. But I'm more doing it out of spite to Lee because he keep asking me when I'm going to get it, and I feel like I don't want to give him that opportunity to beat me and get me back. So I feel like I'm you want to just retire as champion. I'm holding all the cards at the moment. So
I see.
But yeah, no, Lee is loves Football Manager to the point of where like he's like I'm not someone that's going to be taking Elgin City to the SPL. Like I feel like I did that. I took them to Europe and everything. I respect it. But I feel like that's where I get to, because I remember when, I don't know if I'm going back to this, but when Brexit happened, that was what made the next year's version of the game so frustrating, because stuff like work permits were harder to get and things of that nature.
It was, and it was They actually do like they do incorporate some political commentary, and they had
so in depth.
They had the Scottish independence referendum in there. They had Brexit, like you say, all the different kinds of Brexit. I don't think anybody could have counted for the proroguing of Parliament, a snap election, and everything that
players were out with COVID, and it was just
they brought that in as well. Like it's incredible,
crazy. It's amazing how much detail they go in, and I absolutely love the game. It's just I feel like if I get taken too much away from stuff that I've got to edit, then the pile will add up real quick, and then it's like pressure and panic. But look, Neil, it's been amazing to chat to you, mate. Thank you very much for doing this. I do have one last question that I ask everyone that sits in front of me, whether it be in person or in a remote one, and it's just simply, what is one thing that you overthink?
The answer to this question.
I know, someone said that to me before, and I was like, touche.
What is one thing that I overthink? See, I mean, I've hinted at it. I have a lot of things going on up there. It's hard not to even just say everything at times. You know?
That's the most common answer we get, and I think I enjoy hearing that all the time, because I did a bit of counselling training a few years ago, and you go in a classroom environment in any new kind of situation, whether it's work or school or college or whatever it may be, you feel a bit nervous, right? And especially knowing that it was a course based around talking about deeper stuff than your usual kind of small chat when you meet people for the first time. But one thing that I really took away from that course is that everyone has the same thoughts and feelings a lot of the time. Yeah. Like you had to do a talk at the end of it, what you'd learned for like the past 10 weeks or whatever. And I said, I'm not meaning this as a brutal put down on myself, but my feelings and thoughts are not special or unique. But what I was meaning by that was that my anxieties, my fears, my thoughts, my whatever it may be, most of the people in the room share those things. Maybe not in the exact same reason and topics, but it's all very interlinked together. So it's cool to see that, because it's things that we're not told to talk. Well, we don't learn to talk about enough, I suppose. Like this type of stuff. So I think it's cool to hear whoever I have on say that it's cool to like relate to if someone's listening and stuff. You know,
comes all back to how we were talking about. It's okay to talk about our mental health, and it's something that we as society need to do more. If I had to really wire it down to give you that answer to that, I'd probably say that we talked about it. So I used to do data analysis with Stenhousemuir Football Club. I'm a very analytical person, so I probably think of things, and it can be in politics, it can be in sport, it can be in work, where I think of things at that analytical point of view and think of it too much to a deeper level. Whereas some things, you just need to go with the flow. Sometimes you just need to have a wee bit of the more, sometimes it even just needs a different input, which is something I've become a lot better at. But yeah, having that overthinking, that over analysis can be really challenging, I think, for me.
Yeah, it's an easy thing to get into as well. Like I read a book,
going down the rabbit hole.
Well, I read a book called Feeling Good by a guy called David Burns in America, and that was really good. He's a CBT therapist, and it was cool to hear that a lot of the kind of distorted thinking we have is so just kind of like easily slipped into, and that it is part, like, how you think is how you controls how you feel controls how you behave, right? So but yeah, mate, look, it's been an absolute pleasure. We will be having you back for the election, because
bring it on.
I tried to avoid as much local stuff as I could today, mainly because I'm planning on having the candidates that you may be up against, or maybe in the east side, I guess, if you will, for the constituency. And I just thought, to be fair, I wouldn't go into as much local issues today. So at the same time, whenever Sunak decides to call said election, we can get back in touch and talk more in depth on them, and also give me a chance to get put out to the listeners that may want to put questions in on local issues and stuff like that to put to the candidates and stuff like that as well.
Well, I'll tell you what, one last one before I do go. I do have 3 rabbits at home who are very good for unwinding in that kind of those anxieties.
Yeah,
they're amazing. So like Can always go into that next time as well. Into being a bunny dad.
Where can people find you on social media if they want to keep up with what you're getting up to in the area and the campaign and all that type of stuff as well?
Please do. And if anybody has any questions, please do get in touch. Whether you agree or disagree with me, that's absolutely fine. Or even if it's just to how to get involved in politics, and if it's not my party colours, that's fine. I'll try and point you in the right direction. So it's Neil Alex Murray on Twitter and Facebook. Basically, if you put in the search for Neil Alexander Murray West, it should come up on Facebook. I'm also up on Threads as Neil Alex 94. You can also email me at neil.alexander@scotlibdems.org.uk.
Awesome. Right. Next week we will have, it's either going to be one or two. It's either going to be Lee's coming in as a guest. I know, right? Like, he's just left as a host. He's already coming back in. But he's going to be coming in to talk about his coaching journey and the Football Journals podcast. I know that I'm going to get accused of like podcast money laundering here, like having someone that used to guest host this and someone that I produced for, or potentially it could be an astrophotographer. So look forward to however that plays out, and we'll see you in episode 111.
Look forward to listening. Thanks for having me on.